tell us about your foundation and how
Well,
that come about.
actually, one of my best friends is the one who started it. I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. And she said, you're going to run a foundation is what you're going to do. And she started it.
Let me tell you what you're going to do. This is it.
And her name is Libby, and she'd been my next door neighbor for years and years and years and years when the girls were little. And she just started the paperwork and everything. And we had our first meeting, like 2 weeks after Grace was gone. And
Wow.
Wow.
yeah. Of people starting it, and it's basically just the family.
So what's the foundation called?
It's called just the Grace Loncar, although the underneath it is Live with Grace. And like at her funeral, we had everybody wear pink. That was her favorite color. And we had little bands that said Live with Grace on them that were pink. There was just that name was already taken. So we couldn't formally
Call it that.
label it that, but it's the Grace Loncar Foundation, and then we've got the strawberry motif. But but underneath it too, we have Live with Grace, and our main goals are to educate and to most of all take away the stigma, because people just don't want to talk about it. I mean, even people that it happens to, they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to address it. They may even make up a different reason that they died. And they don't want to, and it's so common.
Sure.
One of the statistics Sally sent me, I asked her to send me some. My daughter's the executive director, my 33-year-old daughter. And one of the statistics, it's increased just in the last 10 years, it's increased 70%.
And it's the number
teenagers.
two
Cause
of death in age, I think.
10 to 34.
Yeah,
Suicide.
Right. Yes.
Wow. That is, wow.
And people
I had no
don't
idea.
know that.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
No idea.
You know, but that's what's so powerful is that people are powerful about this. What you've started here is people are scared to talk about it. They don't even know how to talk about it, right? Because most are not thoughtful about it or whatever until you're impacted by it, until it happens, right? And then like there's no blueprint book on how do you do it and whatnot. And if you can, have an outlet like what you guys have at the organization, that's such a big thing.
Do you have,
for sure.
is the organization like, can you tell us how, like, can people call to
well, people do contact us a lot for
help
information, or they'll write in or write me personally or write. But what we do mostly is we're trying to get it in the schools. We found this wonderful program called Hope Squad, and they used to have the number one suicide rate in the country in Utah. And this guy founded this Hope Squad, and they are in the schools, and the students elect these kids that are the most trustworthy kids. They say, who would you be the most likely to go to tell someone you were depressed? And they said the same kids come up on these lists. And they take these kids and they train them, because kids are the ones that know.
Yeah.
They are definitely the ones that know. They know when something's off. They know when they see this. They see the signs of way sooner than a parent.
And they don't have the ability to know what to do.
Right.
So they train them.
They train
That's
them
incredible.
on what to do. They don't train them like to be counselors, because
Right.
of course they can't do that. But they try to get them to where the child would be willing, like, would you be willing to go see this Mr. Peabody with us? Would you be willing to talk to your mom? Would you be willing to seek an outside counselor? Would you be they just
Mhm.
they try to get the child to be willing to get help
Right.
is what, because that's bigger than what they can do, but they can at least try to intervene to identify the child that's troubled.
That's brilliant, actually.
And then they do all things during the year to identify themselves as Hope Squad members, and they do a hope tree, and they do all different things. But believe it or not, we get lots of resistance. We still aren't at the
Why?
high school.
From who?
Yeah.
We're not in at Booker T. We
So
thought
what's
Booker
the
T would
pushback?
welcome us.
Yes.
Well, what's the
The
rationale?
stigma. They just think that it'll
Oh.
put ideas in their heads, or like Jesuit had 4 suicides last year. 4 suicides at Jesuit in
So-
1 year, and that yet they don't want to address it.
So who turns that down? The principals?
And
or
we're
the-
offering to pay for it, to train the counselors, to pay for the kids, and they don't want it. Highland Park High School is yet to accept our offer, and yet the
I don't
middle school
understand.
has. We've gotten into the middle school.
Oh, that's awesome.
So how does that work where the junior high says, we want you guys to help us, identify and be proactive with our junior hires, but not our high schoolers?
Yeah.
How does that happen? What I mean, I know
Because
it's
there's-
obvious you just said it,
yeah,
but
they're
it
just 2
doesn't make
separate
sense.
entities, and you're dealing with different counselors,
Yeah, I guess
different principal,
each decide.
and they have to get
Unbelievable.
behind you. But that's our main goal, because we've discovered that's the most effective tool that we have to reach the most amount of people. And we have different things like Sally and I both speak. Sally's speaking at the care breakfast. We have care cards that all over the country people ask for them, that have the warning signs of suicide on there, and then the different numbers to call.
So do you guys within your organization have the ability to see how big your reach is? Like within is it just Texas, Dallas? Is it the country?
It's pretty much, these care cards were all over the country. We had teachers writing, because a lot of times, especially with teenagers, it's impulse control. Like I think with Grace, even though she'd been depressed and tried, I think it was impulse that night.
Because she was mad.
She was mad.
Mhm.
And it was like, and they don't think it through. They don't think about it
It's
being
final.
forever.
For sure.
They don't think about, I can't come back from this. Kids' brains their frontal lobes just aren't fully developed yet. And they just can't, they don't conceive of that. They don't think of that. And they just think, well, I'm failing. I just failed a test. I'm not very popular. I didn't get invited to that party. This boyfriend just broke up with me. My life sucks.
Mm-hmm.
And that's enough for them.
For sure.
And
You
said that you had an open casket because you wanted your friends to see. Can you explain?
Well, I knew that all of Booker T and Highland Park, because Grace had been real loved at Highland Park, and she was even selected in the musical she was in. The cast votes for the most supportive cast member, and it's called the Golden Cloak Award, and your name is sewed into the cloak, and
Oh, wow.
Wow.
it's gone
That's
on forever.
amazing.
And they selected Grace with the year that she was in the musical. And so I knew that it would be huge attendance and I wanted them to see that she was not alive anymore. I wanted them to look at her and go, that doesn't look like Grace.
Mm-hmm.
As hard as that was to look at her, because she's so beautiful, and she didn't look beautiful. And that was hard for me. And a couple of my family members didn't agree with the decision. They didn't want open casket. And they really weren't happy with me putting those pictures on the internet the other day. But I wanted the reality to sink into those teenagers' brain.
Absolutely.
If I pull that trigger or I hang myself, I really die. And I'm not coming back. And this is what I'm going to look like. It's not a sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Too many people think I just go to sleep. No, you don't go to sleep.
Sometimes that's the most effective way to get to them, I feel like, is that really kind of, they have to see the
You have to
reality of
see it,
something.
for sure.
for it to be more effective, I feel like, for them.
Absolutely. And I think to even more to what you're saying, outside looking in when Grace is around, right? She's a great dad. From outside perspective looking in, everyone knows who your dad is. They know who you are. She's popular. No one knows inner workings or the inner demon she's dealing with, right? But you're saying she's like super talented and
Beautiful.
beautiful. And to think, I mean, anybody would think, no way. But the reality is, no, she really did do this, and this is the reality, and you can't go back from it. And so I grasp I comprehend what your thought rationale is to really make sure that it is inbred in their mind that this is real. You can't come back from this. But that's a tough one, man. That's very brave of you to do that for sure. But it really sets the precedence of everything you're trying to deliver in that messaging.
Yeah, I mean, it was painful for me to look at her. I mean, she in a casket. I mean, it's your worst nightmare. I mean, nobody wants to look at, I even had one woman say on the comments to me that it triggered her because I guess she lost a child. I don't know if it was to suicide or not, but she just said it reminded her of her daughter in the casket. I don't think it made her happy. But that's kind of the risk you run when you make decisions that are bold decisions.
Mm-hmm.
It had nothing to do with anybody else, though. I mean, it wasn't about trying to make everybody happy, clearly, because the pain that you clearly still deal with, right? I mean, it's very real. Yeah, and you will, as you were saying, a piece of you died there.
Yeah.
So it's not a matter of like, hey, I care about not you, to somebody else. Like, if it triggers you, that's on you. It has nothing to do with that. You're just trying to make sure that it is out there of how real this is, right? And man,
and it's a huge problem. I mean, it's huge.
It's a real problem.
As I look at all these pictures of all these other children that have committed suicide, and I look at them and I go, why did he's the most precious little boy I've ever, why would he commit suicide? I find myself falling victim to the same thinking, of like, they're supposed to look a certain way, like they're supposed to look nerdy or unattractive or like outcasts and they don't, they just look like these beautiful children. And I can't wrap my mind around it when I see someone else's child, when it's just this picture of them and no one can figure out why. There is no answer. Because there's no answer that's going to make sense. There's nothing that's going to make sense because depression lies to you. I spoke at Grace's funeral. I didn't even know I was going to speak. I didn't plan to speak. I had no notes or anything. And I just got up and I just decided that it was like God laid it on my heart that I needed to talk to those kids. And I wanted to talk to those kids. And I wanted to get through to them that depression lies to you, that it is the devil. And like Grace did not think she was pretty. She told me that. She told me she thought she was fat. She told me she didn't think she had any friends. That was the truth to her. Didn't matter what I said or you said or anybody else said. That was her truth. And that's what's sad. That's what we're fighting against, is that it's not even just kids, it's adults too, obviously, that they're going through a really bad time in their life that's real. It's not imaginary. Yeah. Even a lot of times they have lost their job. They have gotten divorced. They did lose custody of their children. Life sucks. Mm-hmm. Life is hard. Yeah. And what do you say? No, it isn't hard. No, no, you really are popular. No, you really aren't overweight. No, it is really hard for a lot of people. No, your parents really did get divorced. No, your dad really did abandon you. No, you do have an alcoholic mother. They really do have real problems.
Yeah.
The question is, how do you address that with these where that's not their solution?
Oh, man.
Yeah.
That's just hearing that, I'd say we, in generalization, we tend to not want to talk about that kind of stuff, right?
That's
why. I mean, that's what's so crazy.
I think
because that the pain, because I understand that pain now. I understand what it feels like, that kind of pain, to not want to live anymore. And unless you've ever felt that kind of pain, you feel that kind of pain, and there is no rationale against it. There's nothing as powerful as that. Pain is pain. And there are a lot of people, and mental illness is a bitch. I mean, it's like saying to somebody who's got no legs, well, just get up and walk. Just get up and do it. But they can't. They just can't. And it's the same with mental illness. If you're sick, you're sick. And we've got to find some cures. We have got to find some coping mechanism for these kids instead of just saying, just get over it.
I find it crazy that the schools are saying no because they're thinking they're giving them ideas. The kids of today, they're so smart already anyways. I mean, if they want to do that, they have the ideas already.
Yeah.
I
Well,
find
and with
it
the internet, you
that's
can
what I
go
mean.
and find methods of suicide.
Exactly.
even.
I mean, that's why I don't understand that. It's like always, always, always say it. Talk about it. Don't keep it hidden. We talk about this all the time. It just helps so much when you talk about it. Discuss it.
Mm-hmm.
Schools should discuss it. That it sounded amazing to me, that there's other peers being trained to recognize and that they feel comfortable. I mean, I see it with Jolie. Her friends come to her and talk.
Yep.
Well, if she had any sort of thing that something was wrong, but sometimes she doesn't tell me things. I don't know everything. And what if she could be trained to help someone? I find it brilliant. And how do these schools say no to that? I don't understand.
Well, it goes down to the whole thing, just like you're saying, right? That it's a real mental health
stigma,
is
they don't
very
want to
real.
talk about
That's
it.
right, because and even individuals, they're scared to talk about it because they feel like there's something wrong with them by even kind of thinking to talk about it, that there's something wrong with them. So there's this fear of being rejected or made fun of, or they're really messed up, or this and that. And so it's just, it's crazy. I'm just right there with you, where I can't believe that schools are pushing back on stuff like this. I would imagine, especially with the shutdown of the world,
on top of
that,
more
their
than
kids,
ever.
their peace on this earth was being at school and whatnot. And so then when they don't have it now, they're stuck at home.
But suicide rate has
That's what I thought.
gone through the roof.
Yeah, I can't
Since-
imagine that they wouldn't be knocking down y'all's door to
Right.
get these programs set up.
And even then, my big concern is we've got to find, there's got to be more research.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to find solutions, because I knew Grace had problems. There's depression. Like I said, Brian's bipolar. My father tried to kill himself. So there's depression on both sides of the family. You can look for a lot of people, and there's high genetics, if people would just be honest about it.
I was about to ask that. Is that something that maybe you're born with?
Yeah, I think
genetically.
It is
there's
definitely
a
something.
high proponent for that, because my brother's sons have had a very difficult time with depression. I have another son on antidepressants. I mean, there's a high genetic, and people aren't allowed to talk about it. You look like you're weak or something.
Absolutely.
As opposed to just being like, if you say I'm diabetic, nobody thinks anything about it. That's what one of the main things we're trying to do, is remove the stigma, because people don't want to say that they have any kind of mental illness, because it's like, oh. And I've experienced the same thing, having had a child that's committed. Like, weren't you a very good mother?
Oh,
Someone said that to you?
Well, people look at you
they
like,
look, yeah.
what didn't you do? Didn't you know? Couldn't you have done something? I mean, it's implied in their questions,
mm-hmm.
like, what was going on at your house? Well, you must not have done a very good job. Didn't you know your daughter well enough to know? I mean, there's a stigma that's really, that you're up against, that if she had just died from being run over in the street, I wouldn't be up against.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So you have that on top
So
of
you
it.
have that. That's why they call people suicide survivors,
I've never heard that before.
Me neither.
because
Suicide.
it's a double whammy. I mean, it's enough that you lost your child or you lost your husband, but if it was your husband, it was you weren't a very good wife, you weren't supportive. What, he lost his job, and you didn't offer to step up and get a job yourself, or cut back the budget. They look at the surviving person like it was your fault. You should have done something. And so then and the person who has it doesn't want to say anything until it's too late. The first you find out about it is after they've committed suicide. And then everybody goes, what, Kate Spade was depressed? Like Anthony Bourdain was depressed? It's like people act surprised. Nobody's immune to it. Are they immune to cancer? Or they're not immune just because they have money or success. It's a disease.
Wow.
Suicide survivor. That's interesting. I've never heard that before. I told Sue on the phone, and you guys know my grandfather committed suicide when I was 18, and it has impacted my life every day from that moment forward. I was extremely close to him. And I always say, if there is any kind of thing that's a little off.
Oh, she freaks
if there is
out.
a
fight.
Not even a big fight, like just something wrong.
She's panicking.
That's my first time. My whole life has been this way because my brain, that's where it goes. Like, are they going to commit suicide now? The fear is so real all the time because suicide is something that, like you said, it's so final, and it didn't have to be in that sense. They didn't have cancer, right? But they had a mental illness, but still it was suicide. And you question all these things. And did they leave a letter or whatever? You search for answers so much because it's so, I don't even know. Sometimes I don't have the right words for it.
Are we seeing
painful?
Are we seeing more now? Has it always been that suicide's been like this, or the numbers dramatically are higher nowadays?
They're 70% higher in the last 10 years.
Wow, that is crazy.
Is there a reason for that, or do we know? Like
they don't have. I mean, I suspect social media is a huge.
Oh yeah,
I was gonna say
we've had this conversation before. I mean, we're so we look at what we see online, and we're like, there's an envy to it, right? And I mean, we've talked about the Kardashians and whatnot. I mean, I say them just because they're such big influencers, and you dramatically look at those lives, and you're like, I want that, and that's a dramatic, extreme example. But look at any one of our friends, right? And if you're not aware that everything's not always what we think it is, it's easy to get stuck in that trap. I have found myself like a little envious or jealous of.
It make
something
you
else.
depressed. I've been like, I have to take a break. This is making me like have weird feelings. Like I feel not, I mean, like I feel like you have to do like a detox because you feel like just not good, which is weird.
Like you're not enough.
Yeah.
Man, that's but it's real. I guess you're right. I think social media has been a big player in that for sure.
I mean, and how the girls should look. As I can remember when I was in school, people didn't talk about people being overweight. I mean, you had to be 300 pounds for people to say you were overweight. I mean,
not perfect.
People just came in different sizes, and nobody really thought about
anything. Yeah.
And now, unless you're like a size 2 or even a 0, it's like, oh, I'm fat. I mean, the pressure is just on. The pressure's on to get into really great college, and it starts I mean, I couldn't handle the pressure that the kids are under today.
I agree.
I work with young people a lot, and I think over the years, I've worked with them for a long time, and I feel like through the years I have seen it get younger, their stress level. And I remember thinking like, why are they so stressed at 8? Like why, and not like about school or about, and I'm like, 8 years old, you're supposed to be like playing. There's no stress there, but they were remember like the little girls.
Oh yeah.
I mean, just like shaking and stress from school. And I remember thinking like, you're 9 and 10, like there should be no pressure. So I don't know even how do you relieve that pressure from them? How do you make them just be a kid? Or how do you even, what's the first step at fixing that for them? Because I was like, why are you so stressed out. That comes later when you're an adult. You don't have to
Yeah.
worry about
Younger and
that.
younger.
I
though,
gotta
that is-
imagine though sometimes sometimes that pressure comes from parents, right? I mean,
Yes.
I'm being a parent. I can see, I've
It
seen
does.
times where my son's mom, she's stressed out with her life, what's going on in her life, and I can see that. I can just have a conversation with Jet. My son's name is Jet when he's with her, and I have an idea what's happening with his mom, and I can sense the stress in him. But
Mhm.
because
Mm-hmm.
she's way more vocal about her stress to him, and for me, I'm a big believer in let him be 9. He needs to be a kid, he doesn't know what stress that I have because I want.
I think the stress they put it on themselves because of their surroundings too.
Yeah.
It's not always. I mean, that's what I think.
For sure. And I think it's a good mixture of it all because, I think the surroundings can be from social media. It could be from, like, for example, my 9-year-old's on YouTube all the time. And it could be from these little social media, like these YouTubers that he just wants to be like them and just wants to see what they're doing and whatnot. And so, but he also has his friends too. So I think that it's a mixture of a lot of different things. That's why I even think much more your foundation plays a factor in that because the stuff that we can't see as parents, the friends can. At least they can identify with that. So that's insane. So are you guys making a major push to try to continue getting into the high school?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's. I just wanted to the. Suicide prevention hotline number is 1-800-273-8255. Would you say, I mean, I've read some things too that number doesn't save necessarily either. So I've been thinking about it since last night, since we talked. I'm like, what are the options? What do you say?
Well, sometimes calling a friend can be, I think, as good as calling a hotline and letting people know what's going on in your mind. Is
Right.
if you have a safe person, and everybody should have a few safe people that they can trust, that they're not feeling well, or that they can call and talk to. But I think younger people don't feel that trust because they get betrayed a lot. I think, people talk behind their
Mhm.
back and even older people.
Even adult. I was going to say, I was like, even adults, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But but I think having someone, and then of course having a therapist would be key, or a psychiatrist if you really are depressed is key in getting on some sort of medication. I've often wondered if Grace should have been on, but I had her in the care of a psychologist, which would have recommended, I would have thought, but he had just started. It was a new therapist but she didn't seem depressed to me other than,
Okay.
but now I see the other side, but she was acting out. She wasn't acting depressed. Her usual
was acting
depression was staying in the house for days on end in her pajamas and not washing her hair and retreating and being surly. It wasn't that. But now I see that she was acting out in other ways that are other signs of depression. I mean, or of being suicidal, that people like letting her grades fall or not being interested in things like she used to be in all the leads in all these plays.
Oh, yeah.
Well, she thought she wasn't a good actress anymore, so she wasn't acting anymore. And she had decided she wasn't going to act anymore because she thought she wasn't very good. So when people start losing interest in things that they used to be interested in, is
It's a sign.
is a sign
Mhm.
of depression or suicide, or if people start giving away their possessions, that's a sign that, to look for. But if their grades start dropping, then they used to be a good student, and then all of a sudden that was happening with her. Her grades were dropping, and she's always super smart and had been on the honor roll, and she just didn't care anymore. And those are signs that I didn't necessarily put it all together. Sometimes you can't put it all together.
That's what I was just
Till
going to
after
say.
it's
Like,
happened.
that's what I was just thinking. Even back to the story you told a second ago where you had an accident. She was like, I just wish I would have, what did she say? I wish I would have they would have died or whatever.
Yeah.
And you said, well, that's Grace, right?
Yeah. 'cause
So,
she-
but that's just the normal part of it. Like, how do you, how do you know what is the real time? Like
In
the
the
final, this
day-to-day.
is really happening. She's serious now. When she's just, that's part of her personality of, hey, this is just Grace. He says shit like that. And I mean, again, and it goes back to, again, with what you said, sometimes you can't see until after the fact, or when you can look back and connect the dots of how, oh shit, I saw how it led up to this. And that's, it's unfortunate, that it happens that way, but it goes to what you said also earlier. Sometimes I think it is what it is, in a sense that there's no fix for mental health. We need to talk about it more. There needs to be the outlet so that someone who typically would handle it shooting from the hip, they don't know how to handle it. It'd be better for them to have a methodical way, a method with resources like you guys offer to help them get through that madness, because it's so true. I can think about times in my life where that felt so real. The pain I was going through, by the grace of
When you
God, I'm
lost
still
your
here.
hand.
Yeah, when I got shot, I lost my hand. A week later, 4 days later, I found out my brother had colon cancer. My dad had cancer. I found out the same day, 4 days after I got shot. And I remember moments through that, it was real. Like the pain was so real. I felt like, and I'm not in any form or fashion trying to compare my pain to your pain, because they're totally two different pains, but I can relate to the painful feeling of how I felt that valley. There's no coming out of this valley. Thank God I made it out of the valley, right? And, but there's been moments since then that I felt like, the valley, fuck, how am I getting to this valley? This is like,
Yeah.
I'm glad. And if it wasn't for my son, and again, I talk about Jed all the time. There's many times that I've thought, I'm done. Fuck this world. Like, I'm
Yeah.
done with this world. I don't even give a shit. And I mean, I'm being really transparent on this, in this podcast. There have been many times in my life where I've been like, what's the
done.
purpose? Like, fuck it. I'm done. There's nothing here to be happy about. So, I mean, I applaud you on the fact that you're really trying hard to create these resources for these students. Because that is, again, as an adult, there's been times I'm just like, the hell with this. But definitely, I applaud that you were pushing through to bring these resources to kids, because they need this.
Well, I had started, but I couldn't get the word out enough. I had wanted to have a group that I was going to lead of kids to let them come and talk that were depressed. And I had a room at Second Baptist over off of Northwest Highway. But it was real inconsistent, and it would be like one or two, and I just couldn't get it rolling. But I still think it's a good idea if you could just get to where kids could come, almost like an AA meeting, so to speak, but where it's a safe space and you can come and talk about what's on your heart and your mind. And the few kids that I did talk to, I felt like I made a huge difference.
Mhm.
I know one
like it.
girl in particular was really suicidal, and just her feeling connected to Grace. Even she brought me a playlist that she felt like Grace had like inspired her and had helped her get through the night one night when she was like, just ready to end it all. So I do think things like that, like, why don't we have groups like that,
Mhm.
where kids go
Yeah, why don't we?
and, have a place where they can sit there and discuss the fact that my parents are getting divorced, or, one of my parents is a drug addict, or because God knows we have or I feel all alone, or
The
I'm not very
boyfriend broke
popular.
up.
Yeah, my boyfriend.
I mean,
Yeah.
That happens. A lot of people commit suicide over a boyfriend breaking up. I hear about it.
Yes.
I read it all
All
the
the
time
time.
because of people listing the reasons of why their child
It's
committed suicide.
because
When
to
some of them
them,
know, that's the
that's
end of the
it.
world.
Yeah.
Because their boyfriend
but
broke
it
up with them.
feels like, I remember my
It
first
does.
breakup when I was 18. I couldn't eat it for like 2 weeks. I'm
It
serious.
feels
like
like it.
It
felt
feels
like it.
that way.
Like
yes.
it felt an inner pain, because you feel. I remember. I mean, it's been so long, but you feel like
Yeah,
the
they
world
feel that
is
way.
over.
Yeah.
My daughter's girlfriend was actually spending the night a couple weeks ago. Her boyfriend broke up with her over the text message while she was at my house.
Yeah.
That was unbelievable.
Trauma.
Trauma. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So much trauma. And day in and day out. I mean, she's fine now, but my goodness. Unbelievable.
And see, we don't even know, like, I don't even have a feeling that I even know the half of what Grace thought inside of her mind. I think she kept it in. I don't think she'd let anybody know, which is that's another whole issue is people, because, I've spent years in therapy asking my therapist why. And, she's been like, some people are just treatment resistant. Grace was treatment resistant. It's not like she was saying, help me,
Yeah.
please help me. That would have made it a whole lot easier on me and her dad. She wasn't. She was just the opposite. She was defiant. She didn't want to be helped. She didn't want to open up. She didn't want to tell us what was going on. She didn't want to help her therapist help her. It helps a lot if you have a kid that wants to help you help them.
Yeah.
And that's not the case with mental illness. That's pretty much kind of par for the course. They're treatment resistant. They're not exactly getting in line
to get
And-
treatment.
Do you think that, because I've got to imagine I'm assuming when you're treatment resistant that there's more of like a hopeless feeling to the whole thing. We're like, why even talk about it? Because nothing's going to make it feel better anyways. Right? It makes sense.
and that was kind of her attitude.
Yeah.
She had a pretty dim view of the world in general, a pretty jaded, cynical, like, what's the point? Like, I remember, like, as I look back now, like I said, you kind of do this autopsy of their whole, from everything, like, maybe I shouldn't have sent her to preschool. Maybe I should have kept her home. You start
No,
going,
I
Wow.
can
you
see
start
that. Oh my gosh.
doing all this,
Yes.
but she didn't want to get her driver's license. I never could understand why she didn't want to get her driver's license. But you can't make a kid get their driver's license. That isn't enough to say, well, you need to go to a mental institution because you don't want to get your driver's license. But I didn't know. She was the only kid I had that didn't want to get their driver's license. And she didn't really want to talk about where she was going to go to college in the fall, or when it was going to come up. She would be real flippant about, I don't know, whereas the other kids were a lot more driven about where they wanted to go. It was, I think a lot of these things were kind of signs, of her lack of commitment to her own life, of her future, of her investment in herself, but once again, how do I change that? That's one of those things that's really hard. Somebody has to kind of want that for themselves.
Yeah.
But I agree, going to what you just said, it's kind of hard, but also when you feel, God, when you feel like when it feels hopeless, it is what it is at that point. There's no signs of anything when you feel like it. What the hell is the purpose of it? Well, what's even talking about it going to do? How do you remedy that at that point, right? And it's just.
I feel like you did. You said you did everything. You made it your
Absolutely.
mission.
Your best friend's what you said.
Yeah.
She's your little best friend.
Yeah.
And it's man. But I think we also all need to become more aware, and that's the challenge of learning of how can we see the signs. And it's unfortunate that majority of the time we don't see the signs until afterwards when the tragedies happen, and then we're impacted. We're saying, oh shit, the dot was here. I missed it. Going backwards. But it's trying to set up resources and programs so that we can all learn to be proactive with these high schoolers that are trained to be able to notice when there's red flags going up.
But it sounds to me like Sue did everything that you could have done.
I often wonder if she knew how bad she was just going to just crush me if she would do it again.
Yeah.
I still think about her if I judged it by, do I think about it less? No.
No.
And do I miss her less? Is it? No. And I think how much better my life would be if she was here. And I know how much happier I would be. And I just feel like I'm angry at myself because I feel like I should snap out of it. It's like I can't let this define me. I don't want it to define me, and yet I feel like it is defining. I feel like I can't. It's sad. One of my other daughters said that she felt like that I would have rather it been her. She didn't even tell me. She told another daughter
Oh.
that. And that made me feel bad. Because I think it's simply watching me grieve so profusely that she couldn't help but feel that way. I mean,
Yeah.
just watching me, she can't help but think, there's no way mom would have felt this way about me. Because we're not as close as Grayson. I mean, that's just a fact. We're not as much alike. We're just Abby's not near as open as Grace is. I don't love her any less, but we're not as close as Grace and I were. But I don't feel like I would have rather have been her. And I would have hurt just as much. But I don't want a child of mine thinking that. So
Sure.
meaning it makes me think, I'm carrying this burden around, that I've got to let go of. But I don't know how.
Is there a piece of you? Do you feel like by continuing holding on this burden, that it allows you to continue holding on to her? Does that make sense? That question?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although I don't try to hold on to the sadness about Grace. I laugh about Grace
Yeah.
all the time. I mean, we spend a lot of time in our family telling funny Grace stories, and Grace would have loved this outfit, or gosh, I wish Grace was here. She was so great with hair and makeup. I mean, we really try to celebrate her life.
Yeah.
We don't focus on her death. We do focus on her living memory
Mhm.
and just keeping her alive and part of our family, but not on how she died.
Yeah.
So, but I can't help but, of course, just wonder. I mean, like her next birthday, which wouldn't be till next spring, but it'll be 20. She'd be 21.
Mm.
And I can't help but wonder. What would my 21-year-old and what all I've missed. Like when they graduated, that was just painful to me. Watching all of her peers graduate from high school. Just excruciating. Talk about Facebook is excruciating for me. I don't know why I put myself through it. It's excruciating to me watching people celebrate 41 years of marriage. It's excruciating watching, people with their kids do certain things that I know Grace will never do.
Are you still friends with any of her friends? Do you keep?
Some of them.
Yeah.
And seeing them, go off to college, and she had talked about going to Fordham, and there was a little girl this last year that went there, and seeing her sit outside the dorm and the view of New York that it just kills me. I mean, it's just like glass in my eyes.
Of course.
It's just, because I just wonder, she had so much potential. I mean, I guess everybody would feel that way, but it just feels 10 times worse that she just had so much going for her that I'm just like, why? And she was such a good human being. She was a
Right.
truly compassionate, empathetic, caring person that could have made a difference in this world when there's so many worthless pieces of shit out there.
Right.
It's true.
That
For
just
sure.
don't care about people at all. She really cared, especially being at Booker T, where there were a lot of people that were disadvantaged in so many ways in their families, or were poverty stricken, or
Right.
she really got to see the real world being
Mhm.
there. And she had a real appreciation for disadvantaged people.
Right.
And like she had a real heart, like I said, for gay people, and knowing that they struggled, with being accepted.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I would have thought that would have helped her. But obviously it didn't. I mean, with the mission, with the purpose, with what she could do. But once again, you're not, trying to understand a brain that's not well is futile. And I have to remind myself of that a lot because I try to figure it out, like why. And then when there's never going to be an answer that's going to be okay for me.
Right.
Because, yeah, she had some tough breaks, but she by far had a million more good breaks than
Right.
she had tough breaks,
Yep.
you know.
Yeah.
And it's just hard to believe that it was that bad that she needed to take her life. And that makes me angry. You know, it does make me angry. It makes me angry that she left me.
Of course.
I think the dream more of just being a family.
Right.
The death of the dream.
Yeah.
Whereas for her, it was really a death of my daughter, my child, my flesh and blood.
Right.
And you just don't. I just would give, like people say, I would give everything for just one day with her. And people just can't know that feeling. I would give everything.
I'm so sorry, Sue.
I just don't want anybody else to have to experience it.
I know.
So do you guys have a website for your foundation?
Yeah,
Yeah.
So what's the website?
Grace Loncar Foundation.com.
So
Yeah.
and what on that website? What kind of resources would someone be able to find?
Just like all different kinds of things, but like help, places to take people.
Yeah.
They can ask, and you can write in to, any specific question that you have, and we'll answer it. Of any.
Yeah.
I had somebody write in the other day to my house, because a lot of people are struggling with their children, and unfortunately, there aren't near enough resources.
Yeah.
For children. I can remember when we were looking for a place to send Grace, there wasn't any place to send her for adolescents. There's not a lot available for help for adolescents. Now, adults, it's a lot better than there is for kids. There's not a lot. And she was at one place where I went in the middle of the night and kidnapped her back.
So
Because it was so bad. I
So-
mean, girls were like trying to molest her, and she was
my
like
goodness.
12, and
Oh my gosh.
they were trying to run through barbed wire to escape. They had guards all around the place, and it was just a nightmare.
Yeah.
People were getting
What?
beat up daily. It was just
Wow.
horrible. And she could only talk to me for like 3 minutes, and then the phone would just go dead, like it was like at
Oh
prison.
my gosh.
And I just couldn't
Wow.
take it anymore.
Mhm.
I just went and
Got her out.
yeah. Because I thought this is like, she's like in prison. This
Right.
isn't helpful at all.
At all, right.
And so it is hard to find good care for these kids. And we get a lot of that question. And I honestly don't have a lot of answers because there isn't a lot
Yeah.
of people practicing medicine for adolescents because they don't want to put kids. That's why Grace wasn't on any medication. They don't want to put kids on medication because it can have a adverse effect. The one time they did put her on, it did have a really bad effect on her.
So on the website, there's resources kind of help and direct. So that's great to know. And so for anyone listening,
Mhm.
and I say this as a parent also, right? If you starting to see what you think may be potential signs of anything, and behavior patterns or whatnot, Grace Loncar Foundation.org or .com or .com.
Yeah.
It's definitely something to check out because as a parent, I couldn't imagine, God forbid I ever have to experience some craziness as far as just seeing my son deal with any kind of mental health, just because, as a parent, we want to coddle them, we want to protect them. And we all know this as parents, you just want to help them go down the right path. So knowing that there's a resource and a website that can help be a solid resource for parents and for teens and children, that's good to know.
I have one more question. Do you still live in the same house?
I do.
You do? How
I find it oddly comforting.
you do?
I do. There's so many memories there. And I actually just redid Grace's room. It took me a long time, obviously 4 years to redo. And I did it I have 2 granddaughters, a 3-month-old and a
Oh
and a
my goodness.
3-year-old.
Oh,
And I did it into cutest girls room you've ever seen. It's just this adorable nursery.
oh.
And that feels good because the room just feels so happy now. I mean, it's just so pink. It's really just the cutest room.
Right.
And that's where all my kids grew up. I've lived there for 27 or 28 years.
Wow.
So it's way too big, and I probably do need to scale down, but I'd love having my family come home there and us sit around the table and the pool. And it's actually, I couldn't leave there. It was like, I realized though that the first year I was expecting them to come home,
Mm.
but I didn't want to leave because I thought they were
Still
coming
coming
back.
home.
It takes a lot that's what they say to you, and it's true. The second year is harder than the first year, and it's really true. Because the first
I
year
agree.
you're just in shock, and it's the second year it hits you.
Like
oh, this is
The reality.
Gosh.
Yeah. I'm so sorry, and I can only say thank you
Definitely.
for
Thank you.
doing that.
Yeah.
I have no other words. I'm sorry.
I just hope that and people feel less alone with
Mhm.
depression, because I know personally so many people that suffer with depression, and it's an ass whipping of a disease, and it makes you feel so lonely and so isolated and so worthless, that I just hope that if just people feel less alone
Mhm.
Right.
and less than. It's so good at making you feel so undeserving and so unloved and so not deserving of getting help. And people love you and they want you here. You're needed. Everybody's special. And that's what I just would want Grace's legacy to be. She was so special. And everybody is. Everybody has gifts and talents that are unique, that are needed here. We get lost in this world and not appreciated. It's easy to feel like we don't matter.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing your story.